What's up, fellow bike nerds? Welcome back to the Weekly Rewind, where we take a look at all the hottest cycling news stories from the previous week. Today we're talking about everything from boutique coil shocks to Segway, yes, that Segway, entering the cycling market. But you know we'd be remiss not to talk about the biggest news story from last week, which of course is the announcement of the new Colnago Y1RS. We reported on some leaked low-res photos of the proposed bike last week, and it turns out that those were, in fact, the production-ready bike. The Y1RS is Colnago's first dedicated aero bike since 2015, and I think it's safe to say that they came out swinging. They even claim that it's the most aerodynamic UCI-compliant road bike in the World Tour. To be honest, we could probably make an entire video covering the innovative tech and design features on this new bike, so for now, we're just going to stick to the highlights. At the front of the bike is a bayonet-style fork with two steerer tubes, similar to Colnago's TT1 time trial bike. This allows for a stiffer front end and, more importantly, a more aerodynamic nose cone while staying within the UCI guidelines. It also gets a neatly integrated down-tube bottle mount, some unique Y-shaped bars, and a split seat tube that gives the bike its trademark profile, which is said to benefit both aerodynamics and rider comfort. All of this makes for a bike that, according to Colnago, is more aerodynamic than even its best aero road bike competitor that they listed in their wind tunnel data. Now, we of course can't move on from the Y1RS without talking about those polarizing looks. And let me be clear from the start. Colnago set out with an intent to make the fastest possible bike, not win any beauty contests. And that alone justifies the fact that, in my opinion, it's kind of ugly. That said, it's always been the case that high-end racing tech, potentially similar to that split seat tube found on the Y1RS, tends to trickle down to more mundane, consumer-centered bikes that you or I might ride on the weekend. And I have to say, I'm not sure that I'm personally ready to own a bike that looks like this, regardless of any performance benefits. Do you agree? Am I just being vain? Let me know what you think in the comments. As exciting as the Y1RS is, I think it's only fair that we move on now from bikes that you or I are probably going to be a bit more likely to purchase in real life. The first of which being the new Prologo Dimension R2 saddle. The saddle's shape has been left largely unchanged, with just a few tweaks that should subtly improve ergonomics. The main story here is their new lightweight EVA foam that claims to give the same comfort and support but with less padding, allowing for a 24-gram weight reduction, putting the total weight at a featherweight 135 grams. But it will cost you a pretty penny, specifically 2,500 of them. Now, personally, I'm all about investing money in a saddle that's going to treat your keister well, but I do have trouble justifying that price for a mere 24-gram weight reduction. I think there's probably other areas on your bike that you'd be better worth putting that money in and saving weight in return. That said, if you are racing for the pointy end of the podium, then hey, save weight wherever you can. Let's stick with saddles for just a sec longer and talk about the newly updated Aenomaly SwitchGrade 2.0 Evo. This little guy is designed to sit in between your saddle and seat post and provide you with up to 3 on-the-fly saddle angle adjustments. The idea here is that it allows for a nose-down saddle position for those steeper climbs, as well as a more neutral position for flatter terrain and even bringing the nose up just a bit for added clearance on the descents. In terms of what's new on the updated model, the biggest talking points are the ability to set the SwitchGrade to switch between either 2 or 3 saddle positions, as well as a shorter stack height and nearly universal compatibility via various shims you can purchase from Aenomaly. Lastly, the SwitchGrade 2.0 is $50 cheaper than its predecessor, despite those added features, coming in at $185. It's also made to order, so expect about a 2-week lead time if you want to get one for yourself. Now, I've been interested in trying a product like the SwitchGrade for quite a while. I'm definitely in the camp of preferring a pretty steep saddle angle on the climbs, but can notice the trade-offs elsewhere on the trail. Of course, $185 is still a lot to spend on a non-necessary bike accessory, but if it lives up to the promise of making climbs more comfortable and efficient, as well as making you a more capable and confident descender, then it might just be worth the price. Speaking of downhill performance, let's go ahead and move on now to the fast Fenix 2.0 coil shock. This piece of French engineering sets itself apart from its more mainstream counterparts in several ways, the first of which being the price, nearly €1,000, and its approach to damping. Instead of using a typical high and low speed compression circuit like you'd find on most shocks, this uses a high and mid-speed compression, which they say provides a more effective damping solution during the most common and critical compressions. The biggest updates on the 2.0 shock are the addition of a hydraulic bottom mount, as well as a slimmer overall profile, which should allow you to fit it on more bikes. Lastly, the Fast Fenix 2.0 features a 2-year warranty straight out of the box, as well as an additional 1 year added to the warranty every time you get this thing serviced by one of their verified service centers. So while I doubt we'll see the Fenix 2.0 become a mainstay anytime in the near future, it's always cool seeing companies take a novel approach to things that we're fairly well familiar with. So if you're looking for something that combines premium performance with boutique beauty, then the Fenix 2.0 might be the shock for you. I've got one last notable product from last week to tell you about, and those are the all-new Schwalbe G-One RX tires. The new tire is a pretty far cry from the standard G1R, with substantial center blocks and tall alternating side knobs. With the G-One RX, Schwalbe has also unveiled a new casing as well as rubber compound. The Race Pro casing is said to increase puncture protection and suppleness, while the updated Addix Race compound claims to be their fastest yet, reducing rolling resistance by 10%. The G-One RX is available in 3 widths, 40, 45, and 50 millimeters, and lists for $83. All in all, it sounds like an incredibly versatile tire, capable enough for rough forest roads and single track trails, but fast enough for gravel racing and even the occasional tarmac ride. Moving on now to some industry gossip. And the first story I have from you comes from everybody's favorite e-mobility brand, Segway. They've assembled a team of, quote, bike industry experts ahead of their entrance into the pedal assist e-bike market early next year. Interestingly, Segway says that in addition to selling these bikes on their website, they're also going to be partnering with independent bike shops and selling them through there as well. In terms of the bikes, they're going to be releasing 2 models, the Cyber and the Safari, which, according to Segway, have more in common with modern cars than other e-bikes. This includes things like industry-leading safety features and a claimed range of over 100 miles. It also means massive batteries and massive motors. The smaller Safari gets a 913 watt-hour battery and 750 watt hub drive motor. The Cyber takes things a step further, blurring the line between pedal assist bicycle and full-on electric motorcycle, with a 1440 watt-hour battery and a mind-melting 175 newton-meters of torque. More details on features and pricing are expected to come out during the Consumer Electronics Show in January, and when we hear about that, we will of course let you know right here in the Weekly Rewind. The next bit of news is a sad one, and that is that both Trek and Orbea have announced that they are pulling out of professional enduro racing, at least on a factory team level. Obviously, this leaves some of the most successful riders, including frequent podium finishers Hattie Harnden and Martin Mays, without a team for the coming season. Sadly, these two are far from the first to be pulling out from either UCI or downhill racing for this coming season. A big reason for that comes down to UCI's updated team rules that reduce the number of teams guaranteed a spot at the highest level of the sport. While we understand their argument that it'll increase competition and provide better television coverage, it's pretty sad to see such a significant amount of funding and support pulled from the sport. Our last story is one that we've been following for a little bit now, but the ramifications seem to be continuing to grow. And that's Strava's decision to greatly restrict their API. To put it simply, Strava is no longer letting third-party apps like VeloViewer or Trailforks use, analyze, or compile data collected by Strava within their apps. Strava claims that the reason for this is increased user privacy, but it doesn't take much reading between the lines to see that their actual ambitions might not be quite so selfless. For instance, they have banned outside apps from displaying data to other users, including coaches, as well as banned any third-party data processing. It seems pretty clear then that Strava was trying to corner the market, but in doing so, they might have actually shot themselves in the foot. You see, turns out a lot of these users are actually more attached to the extrapolated information the third-party apps are providing than they are with Strava's data themselves. And now that they're forced to choose, are actually ditching Strava, not the other way around. Of course, many of these apps don't have a secondary way of recording activity data, and the transition to finding a new partner to work with will surely be cumbersome, and there's probably going to be some loss of functionality on some of your favorite apps in the meantime. I'll wrap it up with a quote from Brian on the subject. He said that activity data shouldn't belong to Strava. It belongs to the users who created the data. Limiting what I can do with my own data is really a great way to make me stop using your service. Next up, it's time for some viewer questions, and this week we only have 2 of them. We'd love to do more than that, so be sure to add your questions down in the comments for a chance to be featured in next week's episode. Up first is a question from one of our Instagram followers, Jason Brozik, and he's wondering if we think one day electronic drivetrains will completely eradicate cable-actuated ones, sort of like how automatic transmissions have replaced manuals in the automotive industry. Personally, I don't see this happening anytime in the near future. For starters, the price cap is still too big. Take, for example, Shimano's 105 group set. The Di2 version costs $1,500, which is $1,000 more than the cable actuated version. Now, I'm sure the cost of these is going to continue going down, but even if it was just $500 more expensive, that kind of difference is a lot harder to justify on a $2,000 bike versus a $20,000 car. In addition, there's still a lot of holdouts who just aren't interested in batteries of any kind on their bike. Now, I'm sure we're still nowhere near the peak of electronic drivetrains, and they'll continue to grow mainstream over the next few years, but I don't see the derailleur cable going anywhere anytime too soon. Our next question comes from our good friend at Ethan Rides Bikes, and he's wondering if we're going to be doing another value trail bike head-to-head test in the near future, and if so, if Hawaiian shirts will be mandatory. In short, yes and yes. What I'd really like to see is a sub $2,000 test, where we could compare some hyper-budget full suspension bikes like the Marin Rift Zone 3 to similarly priced but better spec'd hardtails like the Trek Roscoe. I think there's a ton of new riders looking to enter the sport at this price, and I hear often the question of, is it better to go with a hardtail or a full suspension? And of course, there's lots of pros and cons to both. I think it'd be cool to just have some concrete, objective, side-by-side testing between those options to help people make sure they land on a bike that's best for them. Let us know in the comments if there's any sub $2,000 bikes that you'd like us to include in said head-to-head test. We like to end every episode of the Weekly Rewind by sharing something that got us stoked the previous week, and we hope we'll do the same for you. And how could we not end this by talking about the hard-charging freeride edit from transition riders Hannah Bergman and Matt Bolton? If you haven't seen this yet, then you are absolutely missing out. It's got everything from chaotic trains through jump lines and scree shoots to butterfly-inducing rock rolls and drops. So after you go ahead and hit the like button on this video and subscribe to the 99 Spokes channel, then you have my permission and in fact encouragement to go watch that right now. Just make sure you remember that bikes are for everyone. Have fun out there.